All right, so get this. Today, we're going deep on fire alarm project workflows.
Yeah.
Those little red boxes we all kind of ignore until there's an actual fire.
Right.
Turns out, getting those set up and ready to, save the day,
Yeah.
it's way more elaborate than you'd think.
It is, yeah. It's fascinating how much goes into it.
It really is. And we've got this document here that outlines the whole workflow for these projects.
The entire thing, start to finish.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
And what's cool about this deep dive is that, well, it's relevant, even if you're never going to install a fire alarm yourself. Whether you own a building or work in construction, or just appreciate a really well-organized process. There's something in here for everyone.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start big picture. What's the overall flow like for one of these projects?
Imagine a relay race. It all starts with the salesperson winning the bid. And that kicks off this chain reaction, passing the baton through accounting, engineering, project management, the installation crew, and finally, even the FDNY has to sign off.
Wow, so many different teams involved. I bet communication is super important.
Oh, absolutely. One misstep or miscommunication could have, some pretty serious consequences.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's break this relay race down step by step. Where does it all begin?
At the very beginning, the bid and proposal stage. This is where the salesperson, they've got to put on their detective hat. They analyze blueprints, fire codes, really get into the specific needs of the building, all to make that winning proposal.
So it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. Each one is custom.
Yeah, exactly. And here's where it gets kind of interesting. The pricing. It's not just about the equipment. Think of it like building a house versus just renovating a room. You see?
Oh, yeah.
A brand new fire alarm system from scratch. That's a much bigger undertaking than just swapping out parts in an existing one.
That makes sense.
That's why those initial quotes can be so different.
Right, it's apples and oranges.
Oh.
Okay, so once the proposal's accepted, everyone's happy with the price. Who's next?
Accounting steps up. But don't think of them as just number crunchers. They're really the guardians of the project.
Wow.
Yeah, the financial well-being of the whole thing.
So they're doing more than just sending invoices.
Oh, way more.
Yeah.
They're making sure the customer can actually pay for it.
So like a credit check for the project.
Exactly. They look at the client's history, make sure there are no red flags, and only then do they give the green light.
Okay, that's smart. Checks and balances to protect everyone.
Exactly. Keeps things running smoothly.
All right, so we've got a solid financial foundation. What happens next?
Then it's the engineering department's turn.
Now we're getting into the real brains of the operation.
You could say that. The engineers are like the architects of the system.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. They take those complex blueprints and fire codes and translate them into a system that actually works.
Wow. Okay, so walk me through what they actually do.
Well, first, they create this thing called a submittal package. It's like a super detailed blueprint, but specifically for the fire alarm system, it's got everything. Layouts, wiring diagrams, equipment specs, even calculations to make sure it's all up to code.
Wow, so this is like the instruction manual for the whole system.
Yeah, you got it. And that package gets sent to the FDNY for approval, kind of like submitting your final exam,
Yeah.
And in this case, passing means a building is safe for people.
No pressure, right?
Right. One tiny mistake could mean the whole project gets sent back.
So they have to be incredibly detail-oriented.
Oh, yeah.
And on top of that, they need to understand those fire codes inside and out.
It's like their second language.
Mm.
They're also responsible for creating something called a bill of materials.
Right?
It's essentially a shopping list for every single component.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We're talking control panels, detectors, alarms, wires, the whole 9 yards.
Wow, so they're shoppers too.
In a way, yeah. They have to make sure every single piece is accounted for. And their work doesn't stop there. They also make the drawings that the installation team uses on-site.
So they're like the chefs, and the installation team is the one cooking it up.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of the installation team, that's where things start to get really interesting.
Okay, so we've got our blueprints, our shopping list.
Yeah.
The FDNY has given us the thumbs up. Now it's time to make this thing a reality.
Yeah.
This is where the installation team comes in, right?
Right, yeah. They're the ones who take all those designs, all that equipment, and actually turn it into a working system in the building.
I bet that's a pretty hands-on job.
It is, oh yeah. We're talking skilled electricians, technicians, people comfortable working with wiring, panels, all the specialized tools.
So they're kind of like the surgeons of the construction world.
Huh, I like that. Instead of operating on people, they're operating on the building's nervous system.
Yeah, That's a great way to put it. So
Yeah.
they're not just putting equipment in place, they're really integrating it into the building itself.
Exactly. And they need to be able to read those engineering drawings. Like, like they're reading a comic book, one wrong wire, one misplaced sensor, the whole thing could be thrown off.
Yeah, I bet. And I imagine they need to be pretty good at thinking on their feet. Construction sites are known for throwing curveballs.
Oh, for sure. They need to be adaptable because things rarely go exactly according to plan, right?
Right.
Plus, they've got to coordinate with everyone else on site, electricians, plumbers, HVAC, everyone.
It's like a giant orchestra, and they have to make sure their instrument is in tune.
Aha, that's a great analogy. And speaking of being in tune, once they're done with the installation, they're responsible for testing everything.
Oh, right.
Making sure each component works perfectly before the FDNY comes back for their final inspection.
Like a quality control check before the big exam.
Exactly. They run drills, simulate different situations, making sure alarms sound, sprinklers activate, the control panel is communicating properly. It's a super detailed process.
Yeah, it has to be, right?
Oh, yeah. Lives are on the line.
Absolutely. Okay, speaking of the FDNY, let's talk about their role in all of this. They're the judges, right? The ones giving the final score.
Aha! Yeah, you could say that. The FDNY inspectors, they're the ultimate authority when it comes to fire safety.
I bet those inspections are intense.
They are. They come in with checklists, meters, keen eye for detail. They check everything: detector placement, alarm functionality, wiring, even the signage.
Wow, so it's like the building is on trial and they're the jury?
Exactly. And if they find even one tiny violation, they can shut the whole project down or require the installer to fix things before they give their approval.
So it's not just about getting it done, it's about getting it done right.
Absolutely.
And their job doesn't end there, right?
No, not at all. They also do regular re-inspections to make sure the system stays compliant over time.
Makes sense. Like an annual checkup for the building's fire safety.
Exactly. It's all about creating a culture of safety.
Okay, so we've covered the sales team, accounting, engineers, the installation team, and the FDNY. That's a lot of people involved. But what about the people who actually use the building? Where do they fit in?
That's a great point. Once the system's up and running and approved, it's time for the client handover and training.
Okay.
That's where the building owner or manager, they take ownership of the system and learn how to use it.
So it's like getting the keys to a new car.
Exactly. You got to know how to drive it before you hit the road.
Right.
The installation team usually does the training, showing the building staff how to use the control panel, how to respond to alarms, what to do in an emergency. They also provide all the documentation, including the FDNY approvals.
So it's handing over the keys and giving them a driving lesson.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important that the building owner takes it seriously because they're ultimately responsible for keeping the system working.
Right, they have to do the fire drills, test the alarms, all of that.
Exactly. And this brings up another interesting part: ongoing maintenance and support.
Oh, right, of course.
Installing the system is just the first step. You need to make sure it keeps protecting the building, right?
Yeah, of course.
It needs regular checkups, just like your car.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of deal.
No, not at all. Regular maintenance is key.
Okay, so what does that involve?
Usually it's things like regular inspections, testing the components, cleaning detectors, replacing batteries, the usual stuff.
Like giving the system a tune-up.
Exactly. And it's usually handled through a maintenance contract with a qualified fire alarm company.
That makes sense.
They'll schedule visits, keep records, and be on call if there are any problems.
So peace of mind for the building owner.
You got it. And speaking of things that can cause problems, we need to talk about something called post-approval amendments, or PAAs.
PAAs. What are those?
All right, imagine this. Your fancy new fire alarm system is all installed, FDNY's approved it, but then the building owner decides to move a wall or add a new room.
Uh-oh. That's got to mess things up.
It does. Any change to the building's layout, even a small one, it can affect how well the fire alarm works. That's where PAAs come in.
It's like a change order for the fire alarm.
Exactly. It's a way to document and approve any changes to the system. After that initial approval, it could be adding detectors, rerouting wires, even updating the control panel programming.
Yeah, makes sense.
You wouldn't want to compromise the system just because someone moved a wall.
Right, of course.
And PAAs, they have their own process, just like the initial approval. The engineer needs to draw up the changes, the FDNY has to approve them. Then the installation team implements everything.
So it's like a mini project within the bigger project.
Exactly. And it shows how important it is to think ahead. Try to anticipate any changes to the building. during the initial design phase.
Right, because even small changes can have a big impact.
Exactly. And that brings us to the end of our look at the roles and responsibilities in a fire alarm project. It's a whole ecosystem, but it's all focused on one thing: protecting people and property from fire.
It really is amazing to see how everyone comes together to create this system. It's not just about the technology. It's also about the people, right?
Oh, absolutely. Their dedication, their expertise, the way they collaborate.
That's what makes it all work.
Exactly. And that's what we'll talk about in the last part of our deep dive: the challenges and rewards of working in this field, and what the future holds for fire alarm technology.
We've spent the last two parts really getting into the details of how these fire alarm projects work. It's complex, it's got so many parts, and honestly, it's a lot more interesting than I thought it would be.
It really is. It's a whole world that most people never even think about, until they hear that alarm go off.
Yeah.
But behind all of that, there's a whole team of people working hard to keep us safe.
Exactly. And I think today I want to focus on those people, the human side of all of this. What are the challenges they face? What are the rewards? What makes someone passionate about fire alarms?
That's a great question. I think one of the biggest things is that you always have to be learning. The fire codes, the regulations, they're constantly changing. It's almost like a living thing, always adapting to new technology and new ways of building things.
So it's not a learn it once kind of job.
No, definitely not. It's like trying to hit a moving target. You have to be a lifelong learner, going to training, reading everything you can get your hands on, always adapting to stay up to date.
Yeah, it's like being a student forever. But your classroom is a construction site, and the stakes are pretty high.
Exactly. And speaking of high stakes, there's a lot of pressure that comes with this kind of work. We're not talking about designing websites here. We're talking about systems that are meant to save lives.
Right. Mistakes in this line of work, well, they could have really serious consequences.
Absolutely. These people have to be so careful, checking and double-checking everything, because when that alarm goes off, people are depending on them to get them to safety.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that pressure. And on top of that, I'm guessing there's pressure to stay on schedule and within budget.
Yeah.
Construction projects are famous for delays and going over budget.
Oh yeah, for sure. Time is always a factor, especially when you're working on a building that's still being used or being renovated. Every day that system isn't working is a risk. And then you've got the client. They want the best system, but for the lowest price.
Right, of course. So it sounds like it takes a special kind of person to do this job.
It does. Someone who's detail-oriented, calm under pressure,
Yeah.
and really passionate about safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about the rewards. What makes people want to get up every day and do this?
I think for a lot of people, it's that feeling of knowing you're making a difference, knowing that your work is helping to keep people safe.
Yeah, like a superhero.
Yeah. But instead of a cape, they've got their tools.
Exactly.
And there's also the satisfaction of finishing a project. You start with nothing, you overcome all those challenges, and then you end up with a system that's going to protect people for years to come.
I bet that's a great feeling.
It is. And there's also the people you work with. It's a tight-knit community. Everyone shares that passion for safety, and they respect each other's skills.
It's like a family.
Yeah, that is.
So even though it's challenging, there are a lot of rewards too.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've talked about the present. Let's look into the future a bit. What's coming next for fire alarm technology?
Well, one of the big things is that fire alarm systems are becoming more connected.
Connected.
Yeah. They're starting to work together with other systems in the building. Security systems, HVAC, lighting, even emergency communication systems.
So it's not just about sounding the alarm anymore. It's about actually taking steps to stop the fire or help people get out.
Exactly. Imagine a system that can shut down the ventilation to stop smoke from spreading, or turn on emergency lights to show people the way out.
Wow, so the building itself becomes a first responder.
That's a great way to put it. And with all this internet-connected technology, we're seeing a lot more remote monitoring and diagnostics, so building managers can see what's happening with the system from anywhere in the world.
So if there's a problem, they'll know right away.
Exactly. It's like having a fire safety expert on call 24/7. And with AI and machine learning getting better all the time, we can expect even smarter systems in the future. Systems that can predict problems and change how they respond, depending on the type of fire.
That's amazing. It sounds like fire safety is going to be a lot more proactive and intelligent in the future.
It is. We've come a long way from those simple alarms.
Yeah, it's clear that fire alarm systems are anything but boring.
They're not.
They're complex, they're fascinating, and they're always changing to keep up with the times.
I agree. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about all the buildings you go into every day, your home, your work, the places you shop. Have you ever really thought about the fire alarm system in those buildings? The system that's there to protect you?
It's one of those things you don't really think about until you need it.
Exactly. So next time you see that fire alarm pole station or hear the alarm being tested, take a moment to think about all the work that went into making that system.
And to all the people out there who work to keep us safe, thank you.
Absolutely. It's been great joining you for this deep dive into the world of fire alarm systems.
It has. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.